Hi,
Hello.
welcome to Pipcast.
Thanks for having me.
Today we are lucky enough to be joined by Maddie, and I'm Jackie, and we also have Danni.
Hello.
We thought we weren't going to have Danni back, but she's yet to have her baby, and she is known around Kid Link as the co-reg queen. So
It made it.
I feel like every time I come on, I'm like, this is one of my favorite topics. This is one of my favorite topics. I'm like, oh gosh, I can't say that again.
I know our listeners are really going to see the trend here. We really think this will very much be the last episode for a while that Danni will be part of.
Yeah, I'm a bit sad about
unfortunately.
that. I am planning my keeping in touch days though, so perhaps you'll see me pop up at some point.
Yeah, what topic? What topic would you want?
That's another one of your faves.
No. Attachment in general is one of my
Oh, yeah.
that I really enjoy doing attachment-based stuff,
Mm.
parent coaching, but I think
yeah.
someone else has nabbed that,
Ooh,
which is
okay.
very exciting.
You'll be listening with bated breath to
I
that
will
episode
be.
that they do it justice.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about co-reg, and we thought we'd kick it off with just understanding what co-reg isn't. I think there's lots of misconceptions when it comes to co-regulation. So we will kick off and talk about what we know it's not, and then we'll dive into a little bit about what co-reg is and what we use as our, I guess, guiding principles at Kid Link when we're working with families and kids. Since working in this space, what do you understand that co-reg isn't, Mads?
I think the biggest one that tends to shock a lot of parents is that the child does not have a role in co-regulation.
Yes.
It's not their responsibility.
Yes.
It is 100% on the parent or caregivers.
Yeah, which in some ways is terrifying.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's comforting, because if we can learn the skills of co-regulation, it's within our circle of control.
That's it. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that that's like we're talking about co-regulation, and that's the parent or the caregivers or the adult in the attachment figure responsibility, and self-regulation is something that is taught through co-regulation.
Yep.
But actually, when we're talking about co-reg, no, the child, it is not their responsibility. Zero responsibility.
Zero. So I think that's why it often comes into in the process of facilitating and learning about regulation and the journey throughout our whole lifespan of learning to self-regulate. I think that that's why we really use co-regulation as a cornerstone for really how we support goals around regulation or self-regulation. So I think some of the misconceptions that we see, and we I guess, follow a lot of different accounts online, and we have, lots of different resources that we come across, and we often see some pieces of the co-reg pie, I suppose, that really emphasize sensory supports, and that is a huge part. It's a big tool in how we can use a lot of sensory supports when we are co-regulating, but we see a lot that it's really about the supports that we present to the child, or that it's used interchangeably almost. Like this is like co-regulation is about providing deep pressure to the child, or co-regulation is around, just structuring the environment. So that's something else that we see that's not actually co-regulation, really.
Yeah.
Any other misconceptions?
I think
that
the
you
big
see?
one that comes to mind for me is people think it's a real fad. And I think that it's new age and that it's modern, and I'm going to nerd out again, because Bowlby, who is like the father of attachment, he the different forms of attachment really were labeled and discovered so many years ago. And what we know about co-regulation is that a huge part of that is building a warm and responsive relationship. And that is one of the foundations for secure attachment. So although co-regulation as a, label might be something that's now more frequent, it's definitely not a fad. It's something that's been recommended for a very, 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 very long time. I think social media just brings light to things so much more now than when we didn't have it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How would you describe? I'm going to throw Danni under, because she wrote one of our webinars where we were supporting supporting OTs to support parents to co-regulate. And in one sentence, Danny, what is co-regulation?
Co-regulation is, well, it's really attuning to a child's needs, I would say. If I was to put it really, would you agree with that, Mads?
Yeah, I think there's those 3 parts of
She asked for one sentence, and so
Go for it, Mads.
But go for it, because
Yes,
that's why
you
it's
are
so
right.
hard. You are
Yes.
absolutely correct.
Well, the building a warm, responsive environment,
Relationship.
relationship,
Yep. Building a warm, responsive relationship.
structuring the environment,
Mhm.
and then I guess encouraging those self-regulation.
Coaching
modeling
and modeling.
which is hard, which is why I think it's really important. And one thing I have seen online more recently is more information for parents around how hard it is to co-regulate and understanding that regulation is a learned skill.
And being calm and being regulated are not necessarily the same thing.
Yes.
You can be regulated as a caregiver and not feel calm at all.
Yes.
So they can be 2 very different things.
Yes. Yeah.
I think as well, another misconception is like co-regulation doesn't always need to mean that the caregiver is calm.
Absolutely.
It's all about sort of modeling that adult's experience.
I mean,
emotions.
the times when I really have to cognitively co-regulate are the times when I am the least calm. It's very much like that's when you really get to practice the skill. That's where I can almost feel my frontal lobe going absolutely gangbusters trying to get a handle on this.
And we were just, as we were setting up today, we were talking about what co-regulation is. And before, when I sort of put it into those words in terms of attuning to a child's needs, often as a caregiver or as that attachment figure, it often feels like you're going against your instinct. And this is what we were talking about, because often it feels like you want to fix, or you want to have a certain response to, you want to leave the room or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But it's about the child's needs in those moments. And so it's really about attuning to what their needs are and what they are like looking for, or what they, there's no other word for it really, what they need in those moments.
Which does take a lot of instinct, I think, because what they need and what they want can be 2 also very different things.
Yeah.
And I think that's where attuning and having a framework that you can really lean back on when it comes to co-regulation, because you really are attuning to something that is not always easy to identify. We were talking actually, it probably is related, but I was talking about my toddler who is 2 and bedtime last night, and it was a very dysregulated bedtime for both of us.
What do you mean? Putting a 2-year-old to bed is dysregulating. It's the easiest thing in the world, Jackie.
And then putting the sleep suit on, even though she's absolutely exhausted, is always a nightmare. And it was my turn to put her to bed. So I was the worst mum ever because I was the one that put the suit on. So for half an hour, it was screaming for dada, 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 dada. And it was really, really hard because if I went to touch her, no, mummy, and slapping my hands away. And it was very much, it's mummy's turn tonight. And what she thinks she wants is dad, because he's going to come in and, you know.
She thinks he might do something different.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe he'll get me up.
Yep. So what she needs is for me to stay regulated. Hopefully not calm, because I absolutely was not. I didn't feel calm, but I was able to stay calm and sit in the space and reassure her and validate that I understood she was angry, and really just call on my strategies to, I guess, co-regulate and just reassure her, hold the boundary, and be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind.
And that was the other thing I was going to say. When, Mads, you were talking before about those 3 parts of co-regulation that we use as our framework here, which are informed by evidence, is that structuring the environment. So in those moments, like you said, Jack, like she was wanting to get out of bed and you were like, well, no, it's 8:30 at night and it's time to go to sleep. And that is part of structuring that environment to be a physically and emotionally safe and healthy environment. And one of our other colleagues, Caitlin Cowie, and I did a group parent coaching session the other day, and we were talking about the circle of security, which so much of their
the attachment component.
Yeah, so much of the attachment and the building warm and responsive relationship leans on. But we were talking about following the child's need, and Caitlin said to me, why is it following the child's need and not following their lead? And I said, well, if we follow their lead all the time, then she'd be getting out of bed and she'd never be going to bed.
Oh, we'd be having icy poles.
That's it. Exactly right.
At 9 p.m.
Exactly right.
Which is also what we get, the request when she's really dysregulated. Icy pole.
Yeah. Which is like maybe regulating.
That's right. But no, you can have your comforter.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly
Icy
right.
poles for tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And I think that obviously as a parent we have experiences to share, but I think a lot of the skills I've learned were really prior to having kids.
Absolutely.
And needing to provide that warm, responsive relationship in session with the kids that we're working with, and not only for the kids, but also for the parents that are learning this skill. It's not where it perhaps is a bit more new for them.
Yeah.
And they are really wanting direction and they want to know how to figure out what the child's need actually is.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, when I was saying before that it can be the best thing or the hardest thing, I think that the best thing is that you can just lean on being with.
Yeah.
Really.
And I think the other thing there, Jack, is not only have we as therapists and clinicians learnt to co-regulate with the child, we've also learnt to co-regulate with other parents or with parents.
Yes.
That's a huge part of our role.
Yeah. In some ways a bigger part.
Yeah, for sure.
For those of the clinicians listening that work with parents, often that's the biggest thing when you come out of uni and you start working in peds, that you realise the complexities of family dynamics and supporting parents that have varying levels of capacity within session and knowledge and skills and experience, and that's often the hardest part of our job.
I was going to say, people say working with kids must be really hard. I'm like, working with family units is probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a friend that is a doctor who says that they couldn't work in pediatrics, and it's not because of the kids, it's because they see it as having two patients.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like you're managing the child who's unwell, which is challenging as a doctor, but then also managing the parent. And I think that's like a big rude awakening often when we come into peds, especially if you work in a family-centered model like we do, where a lot of our work is coaching and educating families. Can you think of a time in any of your sessions, Mads, when you've really had to dig deep to regulate?
I can think of multiple times where you have had to, so I'm interested to hear this example.
Is that because we can hear it from downstairs? We have a two-story clinic, so a lot of dysregulation we can hear down the stairwell.
No, I think it's because I've come into contact with specific clients of Maddie's, and then afterwards I've been like, oh, that was a really interesting interaction. She's been like, well, you like in session, like I found it really tricky, or this was something I had to do.
Yeah, I've had one recently actually with one of my clients who came in dysregulated. So in the waiting room, mum sort of said, it's been a rough one. It's been a tricky morning. He's really dysregulated. So we were walking up the stairs, and pretty much from the moment the session started, just super dysregulated. Not happy or sad, dysregulated, just dysregulated. It's like moving body. Couldn't sort of follow direction or couldn't sort of take on much in the session. So pretty much the whole session was about mum and I co-regulating to support his regulation. So I used multiple things for myself. I love how Danni sort of says using a mantra. I feel like that really helps in those moments to sort of just repeat something in your head to help.
It's so funny because, I've never realised it was a mantra.
Yeah.
Until I was like teaching parents, and like I think I used to roll my eyes when people would be like, I have a mantra, and I'd be like, oh man.
Same.
Like, whatever will be, will be. Or
Same.
like, yeah. But I
Some
actually,
like woo-woo thing.
yeah, that's it. Live, laugh, love. But I actually do use mantras, and they're really helpful.
Super helpful. But also, I guess it was really helpful for his mum to, like, she came out of the session being like, how did you do that, Maddie? Like, you stayed so calm. And I think that was a really important thing for her to see in terms of I wasn't trying to sort of fix the emotion or fix the dysregulation. It was just sort of being with in that moment and supporting
modeling the regulation.
Modeling that regulation.
And I think coming back to what you said as well, is really normalizing that idea that you don't have to feel calm. So a lot of the time it really is being able to voice your, like a lot of the modeling is voicing your own feelings and understanding that it's okay to experience big emotions or big dysregulation from a physical point of view as well. I think that kids really benefit from hearing us say that. And also, I suppose part of that providing a warm, responsive relationship is understanding that and I don't want to jump too much into parenting and coaching and attachment, but being able to acknowledge that as parents we're going to get it wrong a lot of the time,
absolutely.
and repairing those ruptures when they occur, and being able to say, I got really angry then.
Yes.
It's okay to feel angry, but I shouldn't have shouted at you.
Yeah.
We had another parenting moment, a huge hour-long meltdown at the dentist the other week, where my daughter, who's 4.5, didn't want to go either into the dentist's room, but also didn't want to leave the dental clinic. Now, I was like 32 weeks pregnant. So for an hour long of this meltdown, I cried for half of that because I was so dysregulated. And it was a lot about me modeling in that moment. I was like, I am crying because I have chemicals in my brain, which we've spoken about before, because I'm growing a baby, which means that my feelings are often a lot bigger. Yeah. And so that's why I'm crying right now, and I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Anyway, we hopped into the car, my gorgeous daughter. I was like, so I was coaching, and we actually did have to repair because my husband had to carry her out of the car, and I said, I'm sorry that Dad had to essentially lift you up and restrain you.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she's like, Mum, I'm a kid, so I have bigger and longer feelings than you. And I was like, I'm so proud of that, like, recognition.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of that has come from coaching and modeling. Yeah. And so much of that talking through, and it actually helps me regulate by myself in those moments to be like, I'm crying because of this, or I got angry just then. I'm feeling frustrated, so I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to go and take a deep breath. And often in those moments, it's actually not, my intention is not necessarily to teach. My intention is actually just to regulate myself so I can help regulate her.
Yeah. I think we should acknowledge too that in that instance, I can only imagine Danni and I go to the same dentist, so I know what that waiting room is like.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not pregnant, and I would struggle to hold back tears in that situation. And I think that, us allowing ourselves to feel is okay. It's really around, it's not about being stoic.
No.
It's about being bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. And it's about being able to provide that warm, responsive relationship, structuring the environment as best you can. And when it becomes unsafe, you sometimes do need to physically remove them or put them somewhere else. And then modeling where you can, and modeling through validation of yourself, I think sometimes. Yeah. And also, just acknowledging that big emotions are normal, big reactions are normal. Yeah. And that sometimes we respond in ways that, we don't particularly think we did the best of ourselves.
That's it.
And we can just acknowledge that and apologise for that where we need to.
I think the rupture and repair is part of building that warm, responsive relationship.
100%.
Teachers
all part of it.
Management.
Yeah. It is. It's such a tricky thing. And I think that we often I think part of when we're working with families is really giving them something structured like that we can really help them to understand. And I think that as OTs, we're expected to kind of be able to keep it together. We've had more practice, and I've certainly learnt that as a parent. But I think it's deemed as almost, I guess there can be a little bit of shame around not being able to regulate when your child is dysregulated, and being able to really validate parents in that this is a journey, we're all learning this together, and it's going to take a long time, and we've had a lot of practice in session. So often we are co-regulating with parents so they can see how that can be so beneficial, like you were talking about, Maddie.
Definitely.
I run a parent coaching group weekly at work, and something that parents who attend that group often say to me is it's really validating for me to when they hear my examples of when I have gone wrong parenting or in session, in terms of when I wasn't able to co-regulate because it was really difficult, because they feel really validated and they're like, you do this every day and you still sometimes get it wrong. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes,
absolutely.
I absolutely do.
And understanding that all parents, also your experience of what I guess triggers you in some ways, or your experience of what you find really hard to be with, is often comes from your experiences. And
for sure,
you know, not to get too deep, but I think understanding that about yourself and knowing what kinds of things, like we were talking to our colleague Caitlin, I think she mentioned it, Caitlin Cowie, in a previous episode, that she really struggles with like whinging. That's a particular, like, she's unaffected by physical lashing out. She's like, I'd rather have a laptop thrown at me than listen to whinging. And who knows why that is the case, but being aware of that reflective practice that we really need to, I guess, do ourselves, but also encourage parents to be able to do, helps us to unpack what are the times where we're least likely to be able to regulate and implement things to help ourselves. And I think that can be really powerful for families as well. What are your things that really grind your gears, Maddie, that really find that you're like, I'm struggling to stay regulated in the presence of this?
What's something in the office, Mads, that really
oh gosh, chewing and mouth noises. I can't stand them.
I was eating apple slices just before this, and Maddie's like, why are you sitting so close to me? And I was like, there's no room in the office.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a moment that I really struggle to remain regulated. A moment where I struggle to be with someone is when they come to me sick or with a headache or something like that, and they're like, oh, I've got a headache or my tummy hurts, and I sort of go straight to, have you had Panadol? I find it really hard to be with someone in sickness.
Do you have a partner that has man flu a lot? Is that where this is coming from?
No, I feel like yes, definitely. Don't we all? But
absolutely.
Not to bring my mother into this, but my mum found it really hard to be with me in soreness or sickness.
Funnily enough, that's like science, Mads.
Weird.
Yes.
So you grew up just power through. You're right. Take some Panadol. Get off to
have you
school.
taken Panadol? If not, there was no.
Just there was that sucks. You feeling crap.
Yeah, that really is annoying. It was just go and take some Panadol. Have you had water? Go sit on the toilet.
Solve the problem.
Yes. Instead of, oh, that must really suck. So I find it really hard.
Interesting.
To be with anyone who's sick.
But great reflective skills, Mads.
Yes.
And I guess that flows into the next part, is really when we're encouraging families to tap into that and learn about what things that they can do. What are some, like, I guess from your group, Danni, what are some big questions that you would ask of families to encourage them to think about these things?
I guess I'm actually in the process of writing one of our other PD boosters at the moment for OT Link, and it's on attachment. And I was reflecting on this the other day, and so much of the powerful questions, so many of the powerful questions that we ask are around reflecting on how the adult themselves was parented and then their experience of parenting and if there is any relationship between those two things. Because so much of being able to co-regulate is having an understanding of ourselves. So if we know that something is triggering for us as a caregiver or us as a therapist or as a clinician, we have so much more control and understanding and control of that. So for example, Caitlin knows that whinging is really triggering for her. She knows that if she's going into a session where she has a client who tends to err on the side of unlucky communication and whinges, that she's going to have to implement more regulation skills for herself so that she can stay calm.
Even beforehand as well.
Absolutely.
Being, like, super proactive.
Yeah. So a lot of the powerful questions we ask in group are really around, like, there are a huge amount of them are around the why. Why do you think you responded that way? And then also helping parents and caregivers to really further dig into that and create what Dan Siegel refers to as a coherent narrative. Because when parent has a coherent narrative of their own experience of being parented, then they have so much more control and power over the warm and responsive side of that relationship, which then also enables us to be able to structure the environment and coach and model self-regulation skills and all of that kind of stuff. But the other thing that we ask, Jack, which you touched on before, is we speak a lot about, and Mads has run quite a few co-reg workshops as well, we speak a lot about the facilitators and barriers to co-regulation for caregivers as well. So what are your matches and your mismatches in those meltdown moments? And what can you, is your child screaming a mismatch for you? Is that a barrier to you staying calm? And if that's the case, what can we do about it? Or is there a match in a situation in which you can really understand why your child is? Do you also get really overwhelmed in shopping centres? And is that a match for you as well? So really it's about self-discovery. I would say so much of it is about self-discovery.
Absolutely. And I think that's where coaching comes in so much. It really is about being able to meet families where they're at and really upregulating them and validating them and helping them to explore what that means for them. Because if we come in and say, you just need to do better, it's never going to work. It's asking too much. We don't ask that of kids. Well, we don't as OTs. People are doing the best they can, and often we talk about that as a team, that parents are doing the best they can. If they knew there was a better way and they had the capability to do that, no one wakes up and says, I want to do a poor job of regulating with my child today. So I think by upskilling parents to really do that reflective skill, it unlocks how we can go deeper with that. Do you see that from your co-reg workshops, Maddie? Have you had any parents really come to realise that or let themselves off the hook a little bit?
For sure. I think the co-reg workshop, especially the one that we run with parents, can be quite emotional. We've had quite a few parents get quite teary, and I think it's as you say, it's a self-discovery, isn't it? And sometimes forgiving yourself
For what you didn't know before you learnt it.
or, as one of our colleagues likes to say, if you don't know what you don't know.
It's true.
Did you set yourself that challenge, Mads, to drop that into today's episode?
Absolutely. So a lot of forgiveness and allowing those sorts of things to happen and looking at it as a learning opportunity.
I think it's also about those dialects too. If we think about two things can be true at the same time. We often have a lot of parents in workshops and coaching sessions, Mads, that talk a lot about like, oh, my parent didn't mean to do that. Or my parent didn't, like, they were always really positively intentioned. And that's leaning into what you're saying, Jack. Like circular security as well. It can be true, absolutely. But positive intention can also not be enough.
Yeah.
And so it's okay for there to actually be positive intent, but that wasn't enough for you as a child and it didn't meet
Yeah.
your needs.
Yes.
And so two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And often there's a big validation for parents in that it's like, actually,
Yes.
that really sucked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that really impacted you. And your parents can still have been trying their best.
Yeah, like Maddie was
sure.
explaining about, being validated for feeling unwell. It's like the intention might have been to build your resilience or,
Yeah.
it was probably
Independence to go and if I feel a headache coming
yes,
on,
be
go grab some
proactive and
Panadol.
Or to
So-
relieve the discomfort.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
not, that they wanted to build my resilience, but that isn't what I needed. It's like they wanted to build my resilience and it didn't
Meet my needs.
meet my
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
And both things can be true and both things can be well-intentioned.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good example and something that, we really take out of those parent groups and the power of groups, hey? Like parents just sitting in a room and being like, oh, thank goodness we're not alone. No,
That's
it's
it.
a universal experience.
Yes.
Yeah, there's
100%.
nobody, I don't think if you're a listener and you are a parent that has never struggled
Oh, my
with
word.
regulating, gosh, I don't think it's possible. I think it's part of the human experience. And I think that
Absolutely.
normalizing that is really important and helps parents to really us as clinicians to support parents to unlock that
Yep.
and to then do something about it and learn some skills and move forward with that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us on today's episode, Maddie and
Thank you.
Danny.
Thanks for having me. I'm
Yeah.
a bit sad.
I know. We're sad too.
Co-reg
We'll be back.
Queen
Co-reg
signing
Queen,
off.
that's it.
Co-reg Queen signing
Mic drop.
Thanks so much. And I'm sure we will have you back on another episode too, Maddie.
She's
Definitely.
not traumatized. You did so well.
Yeah.
Thanks. I was very nervous.
Yeah, I know you were. So I'm very impressed.
Love that. We didn't even have any bloopers. What a shame.
Yeah.
Oh. It's normally me knocking the microphone,
Oh,
but
1,000 times.
yeah, so stay tuned.
Keep an eye out for those
Yeah.
people, really.
It's coming, it's coming. All right, thanks and see you next time.
See you
See ya.
later.